The final broadcast. The galaxy was silent, except for one signal. Across the stars, through the emptiness of space, a message echoed. It wasn't long, but its words were heavy, filled with anger, pain, and something more. A promise. To those who brought this war to our home, the voice said, calm but cold, "You will regret this." The message repeated itself over and over, bouncing from planet to planet, ship to ship. Some species ignored it, thinking it was just another dying world's final cry. But the ones who should have paid attention, they didn't. High above the remains of Earth, the alien fleet hovered. The ships of the Zorathian Empire, sleek and massive, filled the sky like a dark cloud. Their weapons had burned cities to ash. Their soldiers had crushed the last human defenses, and their leaders had declared victory. On the command ship, the Zorathian Supreme Commander, Varric Sol, watched the destruction with satisfaction. His skin, a dark shade of green, glistened under the dim lights of the control room. His yellow eyes narrowed as he listened to the human broadcast one more time. "You will regret this," the voice repeated. Varric chuckled, a low, rumbling sound. "Regret," he hissed. "The only ones regretting anything are the ashes of your people." His officers laughed with him. To them, humans were nothing more than insects, an annoying, stubborn species that had dared to resist the Empire. But now, Earth was dead. Humanity was finished. Or so they thought. As the Zorathian fleet prepared to leave Earth's orbit, strange signals began to appear on their scanners. Small, faint blips, too weak to be ships, but too consistent to be random noise. "Commander," one of the officers called out, "there's something odd. We're picking up transmissions, multiple sources." Varric frowned. "What kind of transmissions?" The officer hesitated. "They're human, sir." "Impossible," Varric snapped. "We destroyed their communication networks. Earth is silent." But Earth wasn't silent. The signals grew stronger. They weren't just random broadcasts. They were coordinated. Someone, somewhere, was sending them on purpose. The same voice echoed again, this time louder, clearer. "To those who brought this war to our home, you will regret this." Varric's smile faded. He stared at the screen, his claws tapping against the metal armrest. "Trace the source," he ordered. The officers worked quickly, their fingers moving over alien control panels. But every time they thought they had found the source, the signal jumped, moving from one location to another. It was like chasing a ghost. "They're using old satellites," one officer said. "But some of these systems should have been destroyed." "Then why aren't they?" Varric growled. No one had an answer. The broadcast kept playing, relentless, like a drumbeat in their ears. The words were simple, but they carried weight. The kind of weight that made even the bravest soldiers feel uneasy. "You will regret this." Across the galaxy, other Zorathian ships received the same message. Outposts, colonies, and space stations all heard the voice. Some commanders laughed it off, like Varric had. Others felt a chill run down their spines. On a distant moon, a young Zorathian soldier named Jek listened to the broadcast, his hands trembling. He had fought on Earth. He had seen the humans' defiance, even in the face of certain death. He remembered the eyes of a human woman, her face bloodied, as she whispered the same words before he pulled the trigger. Now, hearing those words again, Jek couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Very wrong. Back on the command ship, Varric tried to dismiss the growing tension among his crew. "They are dead," he repeated to himself. "This is nothing but noise." But deep down, something gnawed at him. The humans had been weak, yes, but they had also been clever, resourceful. They had fought harder than any species the Zorathians had conquered before. And now, even in death, they were still fighting. The signals didn't stop. In fact, they grew stronger as the fleet moved further from Earth. Systems started malfunctioning, minor at first. Lights flickering, navigation errors, strange glitches in their weapon systems. It's probably just damage from the battle, an officer suggested nervously. But Varric wasn't so sure. The voice echoed one last time, louder than ever, filling every corner of the ship. "You will regret this." And then, silence. For a brief moment, everything was still. The crew let out a collective breath of relief. But that's when the real nightmare began. Without warning, one of the Zorathian ships exploded. Then another. The fleet descended into chaos as their own weapon systems turned against them. Ships fired on each other, and no one knew why. "It's a virus," someone shouted. "They infected our systems." Varric's eyes widened in horror. The humans hadn't been sending a warning. The war that ended Earth. Years before Earth became a burning wasteland, humanity had already sensed the storm coming. The Zorathians were not the first alien species humans encountered, but they were the most ruthless. The first contact had been peaceful, or so Earth had hoped. But it didn't take long for the truth to emerge. The Zorathian Empire wasn't interested in alliances. They didn't come to trade, learn, or share knowledge. They came to conquer. It began with small colonies on the edge of human space. One by one, they vanished. At first, Earth thought it was an accident, maybe equipment failure or natural disasters. But when the colony on Kepler-62 sent a final distress signal, everything changed. "They're here," the message crackled. "Zorathians, attacking. No survivors." After that, Earth knew. War was inevitable. The United Earth government tried to prepare. Fleets were built, alliances formed with other peaceful alien species, but nothing was enough. The Zorathians were stronger, faster, and more advanced. They swept through human defenses like a tidal wave, leaving nothing but destruction in their path. In just 3 years, Earth lost more than half its territories. Cities on Mars, Luna, and Europa were turned into graveyards. The Battle of Titan was supposed to be humanity's last stand. But even that hope was crushed. On Earth, panic spread like wildfire. Governments collapsed. The people looked to the military for protection, but even they were overwhelmed. But humanity wasn't just going to roll over and die. In the final days, as the Zorathian fleet approached Earth, a secret plan was put into motion. Project Phoenix. Led by Commander Elena Drake, Project Phoenix wasn't about defending Earth. It was about ensuring that humanity's enemies would never sleep peacefully again. Elena was known for her sharp mind and even sharper resolve. She had lost everything to the Zorathians, her family, her home, her planet. But she hadn't lost her will to fight. "If Earth falls," she told her team, "they will think they've won. That's when we strike." While the rest of humanity fought and died on Earth's surface, Elena and a small fleet of ships disappeared into deep space. Their mission wasn't to survive, it was to prepare. The Zorathians thought they had destroyed humanity, but they didn't realize they had left a spark. And that spark was about to become a fire. As the last human city fell and Earth was reduced to rubble, Commander Elena Drake watched from the shadows of space, her eyes cold and determined. "You will regret this," she whispered, the same words that echoed across the galaxy in the final broadcast. But the Zorathians didn't hear her. Not yet. The hidden threat. Deep within the cold emptiness of space, far from the burning remains of Earth, humanity's true weapon was awakening. Project Phoenix wasn't just a fleet of survivors, it was humanity's final gamble. While the Zorathians celebrated their victory, Commander Elena Drake and her team had been preparing for something far more devastating than any battle. Hidden in the shadows of a rogue planet, Elena stood in the command center of the ISS Vengeance, the flagship of the Phoenix fleet. Her eyes, sharp and calculating, scanned the holographic displays. Every movement, every decision was precise. She wasn't just leading a fleet, she was orchestrating revenge. "Status report," she commanded. Her second-in-command, Lieutenant Marcus Voss, replied without hesitation. "The Nemesis protocol is operational, Commander. We're ready to deploy." Elena's lips curled into a cold smile. "Good. The Nemesis Protocol wasn't a weapon in the traditional sense. It wasn't a bomb, a laser, or a fleet of warships. It was something far more insidious, an advanced AI virus designed to infiltrate and corrupt Zorethian technology. Once inside their systems, it would turn their own ships and weapons against them. "They think we're dead," Elena muttered. "Let's show them how wrong they are." The fleet moved silently through the void, using the wreckage of destroyed human satellites as cover. They sent out coded signals, disguised as the same old distress calls the Zorethians had long stopped paying attention to. But these signals carried more than just a message. They carried the Nemesis Protocol. Across the galaxy, Zorethian ships began to receive strange data packets. At first, it seemed harmless, just echoes from a defeated world. But as the virus spread, systems began to glitch. Minor errors turned into catastrophic failures. Navigation systems led ships off course, weapons misfired, and entire fleets went dark. On the Zorethian homeworld, the Supreme Council grew uneasy. Reports flooded in from across their empire. Unexplained ship crashes, stations losing contact, and strange human broadcasts reappearing in the most secure systems. "This is impossible," Supreme Commander Varric Sol growled. "Humanity is extinct." But even as he spoke, the lights in his war chamber flickered. The screens glitched, and the voice of a human echoed through their most secure communication lines. "To those who brought this war to our home, you will regret this." The same message, the same voice. But this time, it wasn't just a threat. It was a reality. Varric slammed his fist onto the control panel. "Find the source," he roared. But the source was everywhere. The Nemesis Protocol had become a ghost in their machines, impossible to trace, unstoppable in its spread. Meanwhile, aboard the ISS Vengeance, Elena watched the chaos unfold from her command chair. She could see the Zorethian fleets turning on each other, their once mighty empire crumbling from within. "They underestimated us," Marcus said, his voice filled with grim satisfaction. Elena nodded. "Let them. The more they believe we're weak, the harder they fall." But Elena knew this was only the beginning. The Nemesis Protocol would cripple the Zorethians, but it wouldn't wipe them out completely. For that, they would need to strike at the heart of the Empire. And she had a plan for that too. "Prepare the fleet," Elena ordered. "We're going to finish what they started." The ISS Vengeance and the rest of the Phoenix fleet disappeared back into the darkness, leaving behind only chaos and fear. The Zorethians had won the battle for Earth, but humanity was about to win the war. And this time, there would be no mercy. The Zorethian Empire celebrates. Too soon. The Zorethian Empire had never known defeat. For centuries, they had expanded across the galaxy, crushing any species that dared resist. Their victories were swift, their dominance unquestioned. And now, with Earth reduced to ashes, they believed they had secured yet another triumph. On Zoreth Prime, the heart of the Empire, grand celebrations echoed through the towering spires of the capital city. Alien banners fluttered in the artificial winds, and holograms of Earth's destruction were broadcasted on every screen. The Zorethians reveled in their conquest, confident that humanity was nothing more than a distant memory. In the Imperial Hall of Victory, Supreme Commander Varric Sol stood before a crowd of thousands. His sharp claws gleamed under the bright lights, and his yellow eyes burned with pride. "Today," Varric roared, his voice amplified across the capital, "we mark the end of another defiant species. Humanity dared to challenge the might of the Zorethian Empire, and they were obliterated." The crowd erupted in cheers, their voices a deafening chorus of arrogance and supremacy. They believed Earth's fall was the final chapter of humanity's story. But in the shadows of their celebration, the first cracks were already forming. Far from Zoreth Prime, in the outer reaches of the Empire, strange reports began to surface. Minor glitches in communication systems, power fluctuations on distant colonies, and the unexplained disappearance of small patrol ships. At first, These were dismissed as technical issues, nothing the Empire's engineers couldn't handle. But then entire planets went dark. The outpost on HFY, a key mining colony, lost all contact with the Central Command. When a Zorathian scout fleet was sent to investigate, they found the colony abandoned. Not a single life form remained, and the mining equipment had been turned against its own workers. Similar reports flooded in from other systems. The Nemesis protocol had spread faster than the Zorathians could comprehend, weaving itself into their very infrastructure. In the Imperial War Room, Varric Sol watched the reports with growing unease. His once proud demeanor began to crack as the reality of the situation set in. "This is no coincidence," Varric snarled, slamming his fist onto the table. "This is coordinated." "But by who?" One of his officers stammered. "The humans, Heir." "Dead," Varric growled. "They're dead." But even as he spoke the words, doubt gnawed at the edges of his mind. The final broadcast, the human voice declaring, "You will regret this," played over and over in his thoughts. It wasn't just a threat. It had been a promise. As the Empire scrambled to regain control, the Nemesis protocol struck harder. Zorathian battleships turned on each other mid-flight, their weapon systems hijacked by an invisible enemy. Entire fleets were lost in moments, their own technology betraying them. On Zorath AX, a vital military hub, a sudden power surge caused the planetary defense grid to overload. The resulting explosion was visible from space, wiping out millions in an instant. Panic spread through the Empire. The Zorathians had never faced an enemy like this, an enemy that didn't fight with ships or soldiers, but with shadows and code. In the chaos, some Zorathian commanders tried to organize a counter-offensive, but their efforts were futile. Every strategy they devised was anticipated, every move they made countered. The humans hadn't just infected their systems, they had learned how the Empire thought, how it operated. And they were using that knowledge to dismantle it piece by piece. Meanwhile, in the hidden depths of space, Commander Elena Drake watched it all unfold from the bridge of the ISS Vengeance. The holographic display showed the crumbling Empire, its once mighty fleets now reduced to scattered debris. "They're falling apart faster than we expected," Lieutenant Marcus Voss remarked, his eyes wide with awe. Elena's expression remained cold and focused. Fear is a powerful weapon. Once it takes hold, the rest crumbles. But Elena knew they couldn't rely on the Nemesis protocol alone. The Zorathians were adaptable. They would eventually find a way to fight back. "Prepare for the next phase," she ordered. "It's time to hit them where it hurts the most." As the Phoenix fleet moved into position, the Zorathian Empire teetered on the brink of collapse. Their celebration had turned to chaos, their pride to fear. And for the first time in their history, the Zorathians began to understand what it felt like to be hunted. The war was far from over, but humanity's revenge had only just begun. Humanity strikes back. The Zorathian Empire was no longer a force of unstoppable power. It was a crumbling giant, its own technology turning against it, its people drowning in fear. But even as chaos reigned across their systems, the Zorathians clung to the belief that they could still regain control. They were wrong. In the vast emptiness of space, just beyond the reach of the Zorathian core worlds, the Phoenix fleet emerged from the shadows. Commander Elena Drake stood on the bridge of the ISS Vengeance, her eyes cold and unyielding. The holographic map before her displayed the scattered remnants of Zorathian fleets and the vulnerable heart of their empire. "This is it," Elena said quietly. "They thought we were finished, but we're just getting started." The crew around her moved with precision, their faces reflecting the same grim determination. They had all lost something: families, homes, entire worlds, to the Zorathian war machine. Now they were humanity's last soldiers, and they carried the weight of an entire species on their shoulders. "Targets locked," Lieutenant Marcus Voss reported. "We're ready to strike." Elena gave a nod. "Execute the Nemesis protocol." The order sent a ripple through the fleet. The virus that had crippled the outer colonies was now directed at the heart of the Zorethian military. The Phoenix fleet transmitted the final phase of the Nemesis protocol into the communication relays of the Zorethian Central Command. Within moments, the effects were catastrophic. Zorethian warships in their central fleets suddenly powered down mid-flight, their engines fried by the invasive code. Defense grids around the most fortified planets deactivated, leaving entire worlds exposed. On the ground, soldiers found their weapons useless, their targeting systems hijacked. But the Phoenix fleet wasn't content with just watching their enemy crumble from afar. All units, Elena's voice echoed through the fleet's comm channels. Proceed with Phase 2. Engage and destroy. The fleet surged forward like a spear through the heart of the Empire. Human ships, once thought extinct, now flew with deadly precision, cutting through the helpless Zorethian forces. On Zoreth Prime, alarms blared as human forces breached their once impenetrable defenses. The streets of the capital, which had been filled with celebration just weeks before, now echoed with the sounds of battle. Supreme Commander Varric Sol stood in disbelief as reports flooded in. His fleets were in disarray, his cities falling one by one. How? He roared, slamming his claws into the metal surface of his command table. How are they doing this? But there was no answer. The Zorethians had no defense against an enemy that had turned their own strength into weakness. On the ground, Zorethian soldiers tried to regroup, but they were met with a force they couldn't comprehend. Human marines, armored in adaptive exosuits, moved through the alien cities like shadows, striking with surgical precision. In one of the captured cities, a human soldier named Captain Aria Cole led her squad through the wreckage of a Zorethian command center. Her eyes, hardened by years of loss, scanned the room as her team secured the area. "We're not here to take prisoners," she reminded her team. "We're here to send a message." They planted a beacon in the center of the room, a signal that would broadcast across the Zorethian communication networks. Moments later, across every Zorethian world, the message played. To those who brought this war to our home. It was the same voice from the final broadcast, the same words that had haunted the Zorethians since Earth's fall. You will regret this. But this time, the message wasn't just a threat. It was the sound of an empire falling. Back on the ISS Vengeance, Alina Drake watched the Zorethian systems collapse. The holographic display showed Zorethian fleets in full retreat, their once proud empire reduced to scattered remnants. "They're running," Marcus observed, a hint of satisfaction in his voice. Alina didn't smile. "Let them. But we're not done yet." She turned to the crew, her voice steady and cold. "Prepare for the final assault. We're going to make sure they never forget what happens when you cross humanity." The Phoenix fleet moved deeper into Zorethian space, their mission clear. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about ensuring that no one, no empire, no species, would ever think of waging war against humanity again. The war had taken everything from them. Now, they would take everything in return. The empire crumbles. The once mighty Zorethian empire was now a shattered reflection of its former self. From the outer colonies to the heart of Zoreth Prime, the empire lay in ruins. The Nemesis protocol had spread like wildfire, leaving entire fleets dead in space, their weapons turned inward. But the real destruction came not from technology, but from fear. The Zorethians, who had once ruled the stars with iron claws, were now hunted, their pride crushed beneath the weight of their own arrogance. In the grand halls of the Zorethian Supreme Council, the alien leaders gathered in desperation. Their faces, once filled with confidence, were now pale and strained. Supreme Commander Varric Sol stood at the center of the room, his yellow eyes burning with rage and disbelief. "We must negotiate," one of the counselors hissed, his voice trembling. "The humans, they'll destroy us all." Varric's claws dug into the metal table. "We are the Zorethian Empire," he growled. "We do not beg for mercy." But even as he spoke, he knew the truth. The Empire's strength was gone. The fleets were scattered, the colonies silent, and above all, the humans were relentless. Across the galaxy, the Phoenix fleet pressed their advantage. They struck without warning, appearing in Zorethian space like ghosts. No planet was safe, no fortress secure. The humans had become a force of nature, an unstoppable storm fueled by vengeance. On the bridge of the ISS Vengeance, Commander Elena Drake watched the final stages of their plan unfold. The holographic display showed Zorethian worlds falling one by one, their defenses crumbling like sandcastles against the tide. They're sending out distress signals, Lieutenant Marcus Voss reported, his voice calm but cold. They're asking for a ceasefire. Elena's eyes narrowed. Did they offer us a ceasefire when they burned Earth? Marcus shook his head. No, Commander. Elena leaned forward, her gaze piercing. Then we don't stop. But even as the Phoenix fleet advanced, Elena knew the war wasn't just about destruction. It was about sending a message that no species would ever forget. In the remains of Zoreth AX, once a bustling military hub, the human forces planted beacons that broadcasted across the galaxy. The message was simple, but its meaning was clear. This is humanity's vengeance. Let this be a warning to all who would threaten us. Back on Zoreth Prime, Varric Sol stood in silence as the human message played across every screen. The same words repeated over and over, like a curse echoing through the halls of his dying empire. You will regret this. The Supreme Council turned to Varric, their faces pale with fear. We must surrender, one of them whispered. It's our only chance. But Varric wasn't listening. His mind was trapped in the past, replaying the moment he had ordered Earth's destruction. He had thought it would be the end of a defiant species. Instead, it had been the beginning of his own downfall. In a final act of desperation, the Zorethians sent a message to the Phoenix fleet, their once proud language now laced with fear and regret. We regret this war, the message read. We seek peace. Aboard the ISS Vengeance, Elena read the transmission in silence. For a brief moment, a flicker of emotion crossed her face. But it wasn't mercy. It was cold satisfaction. She turned to her crew, her voice steady. Prepare for the final strike. But, Commander, Marcus began, hesitation in his voice. They're surrendering. Elena's gaze hardened. Did they surrender when they had us on our knees? Did they show mercy to our families? Marcus fell silent. He knew the answer. The fleet moved into position, their weapons trained on Zoreth Prime. The capital of the Empire, the symbol of Zorethian power, was about to fall. As the countdown began, Varric Sol stood in the heart of his crumbling palace, staring up at the sky. He could see the human ships descending, their weapons glowing like the fires of vengeance. You will regret this, he whispered, but the words felt hollow now, because he knew the regret was already his. And as the first blasts tore through Zoreth Prime, the empire that had ruled the stars for centuries was reduced to dust. Humanity had not just survived. They had won. The final regret. The Zorethian Empire was no more. Where once towering cities stretched across the stars, now only silence remained. The proud fleets that had dominated the galaxy were reduced to drifting wreckage. Entire planets, once teeming with life, were now graveyards. The empire that had brought humanity to the brink of extinction had fallen out with a final battle, but under the crushing weight of its own arrogance. But for Commander Elena Drake, the war wasn't over. Aboard the ISS Vengeance, Elena stood at the observation deck, staring out at the burning remains of Zoreth Prime. The capital of the once mighty empire was now a smoldering ruin, its golden spires reduced to twisted metal. The sky above the planet was filled with debris, the remnants of ships that had tried, and failed, to defend their home. They're finished, Lieutenant Marcus Voss said quietly beside her. The Zorethians have nothing left. Elena didn't respond immediately. Her eyes were distant, her mind replaying the countless losses humanity had suffered, the burning of Earth, the fall of her family. the screams of those who had trusted her to protect them. "They took everything from us," she whispered finally. "Now, they know what that feels like." But even as the Zorathian worlds lay in ruins, a final message was transmitted from the remnants of the Zorathian leadership, the last desperate plea of a broken empire. "We regret this war. We seek peace." The words echoed through the comm channels, reaching every ship in the Phoenix fleet. It was a message of surrender, of fear, but it was too late. Alina listened to the transmission in silence. For a brief moment, she felt the weight of what they had done, the sheer scale of destruction they had unleashed. But that moment passed quickly. "They regret it now," she said, her voice cold. But where was their regret when they burned Earth? Marcus hesitated. "We could accept their surrender. We've proven our point." Alina turned to face him, her eyes hard and unyielding. "This isn't about proving a point, Marcus. This is about making sure no one ever dares to threaten humanity again." With that, she issued the final command. "Wipe them out." The Phoenix fleet descended upon the last Zorathian stronghold. The Zorathians, realizing their fate, sent out more frantic messages, their once proud voices now filled with terror. "Please, we regret this. We were wrong." But humanity didn't listen. They unleashed their full fury, and the Zorathian homeworld fell into silence, its lights extinguished forever. When the last shot was fired, and the final Zorathian city lay in ruins, Alina stood on the bridge of the ISS Vengeance, staring out at the empty void. "It's over," Marcus said quietly. Alina nodded slowly. "For them." But deep down, she knew the truth. The war had changed humanity forever. They had avenged their extinction, but at what cost? As the fleet turned away from the ruins of the Zorathian Empire, the final broadcast, the same message that had echoed through the galaxy at the war's start, played one last time. "You will regret this." And now it wasn't just the Zorathians who felt the weight of those words. Because in the silence that followed, humanity realized that some wars leave scars that never heal. They had won, but they would all regret this.